Let's go. What's up, Bolt
right,
Bros?
all
How we
right.
doing?
Let's go.
All right.
Yeah.
Bull Bros with a special guest, RichiRichEh. Hey, what's
Yes,
up, man?
sir.
How we doing?
I'm doing well, guys. How are you?
So good. So good. We're excited for this week.
Keep it
I'm
going.
excited. So,
Yep.
as you know, James and I are going to be at the game. We do wish Kai would be there as well, too, but unfortunately, he can't make it with work. But
Mhm.
I'm excited for this matchup. So, Richie, why don't you talk a little bit about all the podcasts you get involved with the Broncos? Maybe just tell the folks that I know you got the Wild Wild West. I was a special guest one time, but maybe talk a little bit about your podcasting and do a little plug for your station.
Sure. So I'm with the MHRT network on YouTube. You can check us out. We've branched out of just outside of Broncos. We also include the Avalanche as well with the hockey side of things. We're doing a play-by-play as well. So for those of you that are not able to actually see the game on TV and are looking for a means of just kind of kicking it on your phone or whatever, we have a guy named Jeremy who is a spectacular play-by-play guy that does both the hockey and the football for us. And so he does a play-by-play, which is spectacular. With regards to me, I jumped into this actually, funnily enough, I was pulled into the MHRT network from the comment section on other Broncos comments or content rather.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So I actually have, I kind of have a hybrid thing where I actually know kind of a lot of the X's and O's and that kind of stuff. And the guys on some of the other podcasts started just running their mouths about crap they just didn't know. And I made it a point to try to make them look like fools in the chat. And say this is why you're wrong, and my comments started getting pulled up and all that kind of stuff. So that was really cool.
Nice.
And then I was pulled over to the MHRT network as like a guest spot, and then they hated me so much they kept me on.
Thank you so much. I like it. I
Love it.
And as you guys cannot tell, Rich is actually from Canada, so go easy on him. He's Canadian. You got the accent, right? We love
yeah,
it.
a little
We
bit.
love
But look, I'm used to the whole like California people poking fun of me because that's where my relatives are from.
Nice.
I got relatives down in actually in California, so I go down there, not regularly, but enough to kind of know my way around.
So before we get into everything, when people are trickling in now, how did you become a Bronco fan? Right, you're from Canada. Have you lived in Canada your whole life? How did that transition happen?
I've actually given this story on two different podcasts, so it for those of you who are actually following me here, you're like, oh, not again. But So I was actually I was dating my ex at the time, and she was a Patriots fan. She's next, and so we were watching one of the championship games at a really big sports bar in the kind of GTA area, which is just on the northern kind of horseshoe around Toronto. And it's called Wegs. If any of you are here, honestly, it's a spectacular bar. Like I would really actually recommend you go. And so there's probably like there's like a 20-foot screen or a 30-foot screen in the middle of the bar where they put the game up, and you have to buy tickets in order to get into the championship games and the Super Bowl because they're sold out. Like you cannot get in. And so we were there, and it was the Patriots versus the Broncos. And so she wanted to go because the Patriots were playing. And I hated the Patriots, particularly Tom Brady. I wanted to punch him in the face, but
Still do. Tom Shady.
And I still do actually. That hasn't changed. But nonetheless, so I was watching the game, and I didn't really have a team at the point. I was kind of, football's cool, but it's not really my thing. It'd be nice to get more into. I played rugby at the time competitively, so I was kind of preoccupied with a different sport. And so I was there, and I watched this Broncos team play all in orange, which I happen to like the color, so that helped. And then I saw the way they played, and it reminded me a lot more of rugby than kind of this throw the ball around the field, gritty style of play, hard-nosed, defense focused, all that kind of stuff. And I was like, I kind of like that team. And then all the Patriots fans said, I hate this team because they're almost winning. And I was like, good, I love them. And then move forward a couple years, and I kind of became kind of a full-fledged fan.
That's awesome. That's
That's
awesome.
rad. That's
Very
rad.
Yeah,
It's good to hear that.
for
Yeah,
us.
know,
I mean,
yeah.
for
Go ahead,
us,
James.
we basically are generationally, inherited into the Chargers from the San Diego Chargers, basically, because our grandpa basically is a season ticket holder for years and years and years, and so we've just basically been a part of the team since we knew about football, basically. So a little different.
My dad's a Miami fan.
Oh, really?
Oh, that's cool.
Oh, wow.
That's funny. Well, that's wait, but he's from Canada too. Is it just because it's warmer weather down there? Is that it?
No,
he
he
likes
you want to find a
vacation
reason to go out to
was a
Miami during the
Marino guy,
winter,
right? Where he just liked watching Marino play, and that was
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
and so he kind of latched onto them due to Marino and kind of growing up and whatnot. So he's a Finns guy, and so he's a classic snowbird here from Canada. So he's going down to Florida soon, and so he's got his golf cart from down in Florida, which is all like rocked out in Miami gear, and of course like all the locals down there. It's like, dude, you're from Canada and you have like more Dolphins gear than like half the Americans down here. Like, what's going on?
Right?
Awesome.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Isn't that
That's
the
funny.
best, man? Yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome to hear how people's stories progress. They become certain fans of certain teams and things like that. So that's great to hear that. So that's amazing. Well, I know we don't have a ton of time with you today, so we want to get into specifically this matchup, right? So maybe what we should do is, why don't you just we could generally talk about maybe the offense, defense, and then special teams, and then we could go into what we think each team needs to do to win moving forward in this game on Monday night. It's going to be an exciting game. We're going to be, James and I are going to be tailgating. Should be a good time. So maybe we talk a little bit about offense first, Rich, and kind of get your thoughts on the Broncos offense, where they stand. Then we could talk about the Chargers offense. And then we'll start answering questions. I know Aether's got a couple questions already in here in the chat, and a few other people are going to throw some questions out at us. So put the questions in. We will get to them as well.
So make sure
so the Broncos
you're
have an
ready for it.
offense. We're not pretty good. We're not doing very well. And so what about the Chargers?
Actually, I will say this. You know what's crazy about this? I was looking at the Chargers offense. We're averaging total of 390 yards per game, but the Broncos offense is 343 yards per game. That's not a whole lot different.
No,
and then you look
I joke, but I mean, it's not great. We're basically moving the ball between the 20s better than people think we are.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of why you're so surprised looking at that, because I mean, who the heck loses a game 12-9?
Yeah.
I mean, I've had soccer games with higher scores than that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even think I've had a softball game with that low scoring. Actually, no, it's not true. 9-10 was the lowest one I ever was involved in, and that was kind of a crazy one.
Look, the point that we're comparing football and softball scores, I think, says a lot, right?
It's exactly right.
Let's call a duck a duck. Our offense isn't great.
Well, and then Russell Wilson's got 1,254 yards, and Herbert's got 1,448 or 78 yards and 10 touchdowns. Of course, so what you're saying is red zone offense is lacking for the Broncos.
So
now, let me ask this question:
we are DAL in red zone.
You're what?
DAL. I'm not sure if we're allowed to curse on this show or not, but
yeah, you can curse whatever you want. You can say whatever you want.
Deadass last.
Yeah.
In red zone.
Is it really that bad? Okay.
Trust me, it's really that bad. Like, I think there's, is he 2 for 12? I think it's 2 for 12. So he's had 12 throws from the red zone from the red zone to the end zone, and Wilson has only made 2 of the 12 throws into the end zone.
Interesting.
Break.
Well, it's an interesting thing about like that last game too. When you guys had the drive where you could have scored a touchdown, throwing it to KJ Hamler 100%. Was pretty much open right there in the middle of the
Which
field.
One?
It was
last
the
game.
last
no.
game.
Which there were 2 of them.
Oh yeah, it was twice. Yeah.
Twice.
He was open twice.
Yeah, well, and it's funny because I remember looking at it and Russell Wilson just looking to the left and didn't even look straight in front of him, and he literally could have it would have been the simplest little throw right to him. Boom, touchdown, game over. It would have been. It's just funny to be able to see Russell Wilson do things like that. He's not allowing, for some reason, Russell Wilson's not being Russell Wilson and doing those Russell Wilson type plays. He's not being himself. He's not cooking right now. He's I don't know what's another way.
Russ is sus.
The Russ is sus. No muscle Russell. I think I said that to you, Andy. No muscle Russell.
Russell.
I don't know, but whatever. It's really weird to be able to see how Russell Wilson has changed heavily within this offense. Is it the offense? Is it Nathaniel Hackett? I don't know. That's a question for you, Rick. Think it's him?
Yeah. And I know I'm in I'm in a rare group, actually. The short answer is no. Yeah. So when you actually look at the All-22 film and aren't just going off of the media, talking points and other nonsense, and you actually watch the game, that has nothing to do with an offensive scheme when you have a wide open receiver and you just don't throw it to him.
Yep.
Like, I'm sorry. Yep. Like, I'm sorry, you're wrong. Like, so I don't know what else to tell you. It's like, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to throw into a guy that's covered and leave the wide open dude and just say, no, we're good. And no, that is not an offensive scheme problem. That is a quarterback problem. Now, I think what the real issue there is, I do think his injury, which is the lat, which is kind of right in this area here. Yeah. I actually think that injury likely occurred sooner than they are letting on. I also think that there's probably some evidence to indicate that it is impacting him a little bit more than they are also letting on to the fan base. You're noticing things like the anticipatory throws are just not being made, and he is seeing the guy and trying to make the throw that you saw him make so often in Seattle, and he doesn't have the same zip on the ball, which kind of gets from point A to point B. So if you're slower at getting the ball from A to B, then that gives the defender that extra little bit of time. And we're talking seconds, like we're talking NFL football here. This is like a second makes a difference, right? And that's what we're seeing here is we're seeing that those throws are just not being made. And I think that has to do with that injury, in my opinion. And I think it's being underplayed, and I think that's a problem.
Got it.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
It's tough to be able to see things like that, because I have a buddy that I chat with all the time that's a Broncos fan, lives in Denver. And he always talked, and I remember going into the preseason, it's like, yeah, we finally got this quarterback. We got that guy. He's the new Peyton Manning for Denver. And I get it. You guys have gone through a huge amount of quarterbacks hoping to be that guy, and just hasn't really worked out. But I was thinking it was extremely suspect to be able to have you guys sign an extension to him when he hasn't even played one game yet. And that to me is like, it's a little bit of a red flag doing something like that, because, first off, we don't really know what he truly is still. And why did Seattle give up him too? I mean, he's had a lot of sacks on his body. And I think I saw this year he's been sacked, was it like 16 times or something? It's like a pretty fair chunk amount of like sacks.
Yeah, the line is pretty bad from what I can tell. Yeah.
And once again, is that Russ too? That just being slow about making decisions too? Is he just not doing well? So go ahead and speak on that. That would be a great thing if you got any little insight on that.
So you've asked two questions in one. And yes,
it was a really long-winded question.
No.
Land your plane.
Land your questions and just sandwich them together, and then pretended he only asked me one thing. So James, I picked up on that. Thanks. But with regards to the first piece, I was in the same camp, right, where Russell Wilson was kind of a veteran quarterback. You weren't going to have the same type of drama as you were going to have with some of the, we'll call it immaturity of some of the younger quarterbacks, where you kind of saw them make some kind of silly mistakes and not handle themselves well in certain situations. So I was actually quite excited about Russ at first. I was very, very concerned about what the Broncos did in terms of giving away our draft capital, because I have always been a proponent of the Broncos having a soft offensive line, because I don't want us to have one, but we do have one. And you can't rebuild an offensive line, particularly at the right tackle position, typically without having a top tier pick in order to select the guy with.
Yep.
And then on the flip side, our interior defensive line has been struggling the last 3 to 4 years in terms of getting that interior pressure from the guard, center, and then other guard spot on the D line. And we really need someone to kind of fill that role for us. And again, typically speaking, in the draft, you need that first or second round pick in order to fill that gap. and trading away 2 of them kind of hinders your ability to kind of make those
100%,
moves.
yeah.
And that's a big deal from my perspective. But I was quite pleased actually with getting a guy like Russ, because what I was hoping for is that Russ would come here and that we would solidify a deal that was fair on both sides, that he got a reasonable number, but then he didn't go crazy. And instead we kind of went a little further than I would have preferred with his contract and gave it to him early. Now, on your other comment about paying him, when we did, I actually believe that was part of the deal to come here.
Yeah, I would imagine.
Yeah.
And so I agree with you, but a deal's a deal.
Yep.
And when you agree to waive a no trade clause, you have certain expectations that the other part of that deal is also met as well.
Yeah, I'm trying to get paid too. And, I know with new ownership that came in too, I'm sure they're trying to put some sort of standard in place too, that if we're going after a guy, we're going to pay you kind of thing too. So it's trying to make them look good. Now, even to say with the coaching staff, that coaching staff came in before the new ownership came in too. So they didn't really make the decision for the coaching staff too. So there is a little bit of a disconnect in a sense if the ownership really gets involved in this team too. So
same could be held true for a lot of the players they extended as well.
For sure.
And I actually think, again, I am so not your typical Broncos fan. But I am of the opinion that you could see some prominent Broncos players, if our season continues the way that it's going right now, getting traded for the exact reasons I said earlier. And that is that the Denver Broncos are basically light on draft picks, particularly in the first and second rounds, because we have none. And what's clear is we have a lot of work to do. And the only way you can do that by making up the difference between A and B is to trade players that will get you picks that fit into the first and second round.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe free up some cap space as well in the process also.
Correct.
We should probably talk about the defense as well too, right? Your defense has been great, right? I mean, I'm going to talk about a few people: Josie Jewell, Bradley Chubb, and then Patrick Surtain. I would say those are probably your 3 top defensive players.
Simmons too.
Oh
Justin
God, I hope
Simmons.
not.
Yep.
And then who else?
Justin Simmons.
Simmons.
Yep.
So remember my previous comments about trading guys
Players
that will likely bring you back first and second round picks.
Sure.
Yep.
So I just said on the Wild Wild West podcast, and I'm dead serious about it. And this is kind of what sets me apart from some of the other guys on the MHRT network is I think Simmons is a really good player, but I don't think that he has shown up so aggressively on tape that he deserved like a $15 million a year contract.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, and this is the other thing that pains me to say it, he might be the nicest guy I've ever seen off the field.
Right. Yeah.
Like some of the stuff that he does within the community really truly deserves all of the accolades that you can give a guy. He is spectacular within the Denver community and really should be celebrated for the work that he does around Denver with the hospitals and with children and all the other stuff. He is really a genuinely nice guy. He and his wife, actually, by the way, it's a family affair with them, which I think is really nice to see as well. But he would be someone that I could see with the emergence of Caden Stearns, for example.
Yep, Stearns.
Where the Broncos could turn and say, okay, Stearns has not really been a drop-off when you compare him, generally speaking, to what Justin Simmons has done for us. And Justin Simmons both has a high cap number and could likely yield for a safety-needy team who wants a leader on the defensive side of the ball. And make no mistakes, Justin Simmons is a leader on the defensive side of the ball.
Great. For sure.
And he could be a great pickup for someone, and we could well get a first-round pick or a second-round pick for him from another team. And if our season is not looking on the up and up, he could be someone that the Broncos might look to move. To your point, ownership never signed him to that big contract, and the coaching staff that's currently here never signed him to that contract. So it's quite possible that they see him as someone that is perhaps worth more to them for the draft capital that they're able to pull back from him as opposed to being on the roster. That would be a huge hit from a morale perspective, I think, for the team. But right now, it's not like we're, going bananas as a team anyway. So I think there's something to be said for trying to look ahead rather than hope that things are going to work out. And I think you need that capital to do so.
Agreed.
Yeah,
So
totally.
let me ask you this question. I know both of our head coaches have had some fire thrown their direction recently, right? Nathaniel Hackett, obviously Brandon Staley, Fourth and Staley. That's one of our – actually, it's right here. See Fourth and Staley? You see that on my board right here? Kyle, we need to get that shirt put up. We need to get that shirt made. And
Fourth and
what are
Staley.
your-
I think that one
Fourth
already
and Staley.
exists in some other communities. Yeah,
It does.
so-
I've seen it.
Yep.
Yeah, we got to make that happen, though. We got to make that happen. It came from us. That came from us. They just took our idea. That's okay.
No, that was last year. That was last year.
And
When we
guys,
started-
you have a question in there from John Rowley. I really.
Oh no, yeah,
like that one.
we're just talking. We're summing up. We'll get all the questions in a little bit later.
Okay.
Yes,
Yeah, but my question with you, though, specifically, though, Rich, what are they saying specifically? What are your thoughts? Okay, you guys, let me preface my question. You guys had Josh McDaniels. Wheels fell off the track. You guys let him go. Can you foresee something like that happening here in Denver if things really go bad? Maybe get 4 wins or so for this season. If it were to go that direction, I don't think it will. But what are your thoughts? And what are they talking about as far as coaching is concerned in Denver at this point? Are people hitting the ripcord? Get rid of Hackett, all the above. What's your general take on all that?
I actually don't think that's likely going to happen. Now, the media narrative was originally actually when don't get me wrong, there were some real issues at the earlier stage of the season where there was clear, play calling miscues and whatnot. So that's on the head coach, 100%. However, I also want to point people back to what we looked like in the preseason.
Yeah.
So people love to say, "Oh my gosh, this is all head coaching." It's like, okay, really? Then why did we look unbelievably prepared in the preseason for every single game that we're all back-to-back to? And that's also on the head coach.
Yeah.
So I think it's important that as fans, we kind of look at things more objectively rather than following blindly with whatever mainstream media decides to throw at you that particular week. I think you actually need to look at things with your own eyes and think critically. And my opinion is I don't think this is a head coaching problem. I actually think Nathaniel Hackett, rather. I think Nathaniel Hackett is an incredibly self-critical individual who has a great head on his shoulders. And I think that he recognized very early on that he was in a conundrum where he underestimated the amount of work that the head coaching duties were going to take for him. And he brought in a guy to help him alleviate some of the play calling duties for the time being that had more experience than his current OC. And then that allowed him to then focus on the holistic component of what his head coaching duties entailed. And that I think that what he's going to eventually do is start to dial that back and bring that back in-house to him and eventually go back to what he originally wanted to do. I actually think that that's a sign of a great leader, someone that recognizes their strengths and weaknesses and is able to look inward and do so quickly and act quickly. So I actually don't see Hackett and Staley, for example, on the same page, because in my opinion, I haven't seen Staley make any adjustments, despite the fact that you're seeing some of the same mistakes crop up repeatedly.
Yep.
Right? Yep. I actually see the two as being very different when it comes to how they approach errors and issues. Frankly, I prefer the Hackett approach. Do something and do something quickly and fix it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I kind of live by a motto: live and don't learn, and I think that's Staley's idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, the one thing that I will say is that he definitely focuses on his process. He keeps talking.
Yeah.
I just actually watched his just recently, just got posted just a few minutes ago. Watched before I jumped on, and he's like, "Look, we have a process. Our process is this way, right?" And he's all about the analytics. And it was interesting. I was watching the Monday Night Football game with the Raiders, and it was 4th and 1. And then Devontae Adams was open for that 4th and 1. They scored a touchdown on it. And, if you look at the analytics breakdown of that one play, you knew that it was 4th and 1. You knew they were going to jam the middle, and you knew they were going to have one-on-one for Devontae Adams right there. And so that's where the analytics makes a lot of sense. Now, I could break down so many of the other times that Staley's gone for it on 4th and 2. The funny thing is, though, and I will say this, guys, too. This is an interesting statistic that I heard on Good Morning Football. The Chargers are 7-0 when they go for it on 4th downs twice in per game. So if they keep going for it, they typically always win. So it's an interesting statistic, but it's one of those things where I think he wants to be all gas, no brakes, but he also does it in a, yes, it may look like chaotic manner, but he has a method to his madness. And I don't think he really wants to talk about it a whole lot. He kind of dances around it. But in his mind, his process is set, and that's what they're going to keep doing. So I don't know. It's interesting. I still criticize him for not punting on that 4th and 2. I still think he should have punted. But, the analytics basically was 50-50 is if you break it down. So really interesting.
Sure, but the problem with that is that I actually heard this also on a different show. So we're both kind of quoting different sources here, but on the flip side, there's another side to that, which is, are you now using analytics as an excuse?
Yeah.
Yep.
So for example, there's certain situations that you just know, you just don't do it. And I think that was one of them is you're in a certain circumstance. So for example, in the analytics side of things, did it factor in the circumstance and the time of game where you were in? Did it factor in what your opponent had done thus far? Did it factor in any of those other elements that are critical in terms of game time decisions? And if it didn't, then I think you're better off going with incorporating analytics, but in those critical situations, going with your gut.
Yeah. It's interesting though, and I did a video. I guess it was a couple days ago, where I kind of break it down specifically that one time they went for it on 4th and 2. I'm warming up to the idea more. The more I've looked into it, the more it makes sense. But boy, he's going to live and die by it. That's it. Bottom line, that's what he's going to do, right? He's going to keep doing it. It's very clear. But it was interesting. He talked about it today, and let's move on to another topic after this. I know we're kind of rambling on about it, but he goes, look, it didn't really present itself in the Texans game, and they didn't go for it very often in the Texans game. But he said, no, it makes more sense in some of these other games that we play. So, his view is it's kind of a case by case basis, and I don't know. It's really an interesting situation. But I will say this. I do think it's changing the game. And there's so much analytics coming to all these coaches. They can just come back on and say, oh, well, the analytics told me to do it. Analytics told me to do it.
That was my point. It's exactly a crutch. It's an excuse. And so many fans are so involved in fantasy football now where they look at all the points and the stats and the numbers and they're like, well, of course you would have done that. And then, you look at other guys that are, I mean, I'm an old school rugby dude where I believe in hitting people with no pads at full speed, and I don't give a crap what happens to you or me, for that matter. And so my grandfather, my great grandfather played Hamilton Ticats as a leatherhead, no pads, and to call that a helmet is being generous. So I come from a family that just kind of, we have a different mental mindset.
Yeah.
And I don't like this new style of football. It's soft. You're playing a contact sport. Get over it.
Yep.
If you don't want to get hit, go play dodgeball.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, it's true. And the protect the quarterback rules are just getting ridiculous. You can't
like that Chris Jones sack. Oh,
yes,
that was ridiculous.
100%.
That was ridiculous.
Terrible.
That was a clean sack.
Did you guys see the outkick video of how to sack a quarterback?
Yeah. With are you talking about with Kevin Hart, where he was
Kevin Hart babying him?
I haven't seen it. I need to check that out.
Oh, so good.
Oh,
so good.
You might cry.
Okay, I want to cry. Good. I enjoyed that. That's fine.
No, I mean cry laugh as well. Like, okay, I mean cry laugh. Yeah, like you will cry laugh. It is that funny.
Okay, I'll have to check it out then. Okay, I'll have to Google that for sure.
Yeah. They pick him up and they coddle him like a baby, and then they kind of put a pillow down, and then they lay him down gently onto the pillow, and they tuck him in with the blanket. Oh, it's just
fantastic.
Oh yeah.
Okay, I'll check that out. Okay, so
and just to say, like,
go ahead,
coaches making kind of questionable decisions. Obviously, we go to game one with you guys and Nathaniel Hackett going for what, a 64-yard field goal.
I was all for that.
Before that. So the play before
No,
it.
I was all for that.
Oh, you were all for it. You were good for it.
Mhm.
Huh. Interesting. Because the way I view that as is, if you were in Mile High, yeah, you got that elevation difference. It's going to float, as you kind of know. McManus has a great leg and everything, and he's obviously a strength of your guys' team. But to say on a coastal place like Seattle, the ball travels a little differently there.
Yeah.
And so
heavier.
I don't know. It's kind of a questionable in my opinion, and that's
The
one thing
ball
that's
was
interesting about
halfway
the
up the
AFC West.
uprights.
Say that one more time.
The ball was halfway up the uprights.
Yep, it was huge.
He was 65 yards out.
Yep.
And he kicked the ball to halfway up the uprights.
Yep.
Distance was not a problem.
Yep.
He pulled it a little bit. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Technically he pushed it a little bit. And I mean, McManus, generally speaking, makes a percentage of those. And when you have a kicker that even not at altitude, that is practicing before the games and knocking through 70 and 75-yard field goals because it's fun and making them, why not?
Yep. Well, it is interesting. And you definitely think it's close to a NFL record attempt. And McManus has got a great leg. He's one of the best in the league. And he could definitely knock those down. But even to go to the play before that and choosing not to be able to have Russell Wilson go for it at 4th and 2, you think, man, did they kind of know Russell Wilson was not able to get 2 yards? I mean, as most people in the NFL
That's what I said.
Okay, got it.
That's exactly what I said.
Good,
yes.
perfect.
Yes.
So
I actually think he was not feeling 100% at the time, and I think that I also think it's a bit of a. You had that comment that I was kind of calling out before from your viewer about, for lack of a better word, we'll just call it ego.
Yeah.
And I think that has played a bit of a role in what we're seeing as the product on the field. And don't get me wrong, I think Russ can do a lot of the things that we need him to do, but I also think that Russ is really wanting to be the reason.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I can see that.
And I think when you look at what we're seeing on the Broncos, and you're seeing Russ to Sutton, Russ to Judy, Russ to Sutton, Russ to Judy, and you're looking at these certain targets that have certain names that people expected to blow up. Like Judy, everyone expected to just be a breakout player at the NFL.
Right.
Frankly, he's dropped a boatload of balls, and he hasn't looked particularly great when he's coming to the NFL. But everyone expected him to be that marquee player, right? Because I mean, he can run routes. He's a very good route runner, and he's doing a very good job. He's not catching the ball, and Sutton is clearly a marquee wide receiver, and I think that's appropriate that he's heavily used, but he shouldn't be the only one used. And I think that's what the problem is that Russ is wanting to be the guy, and I think that Russ is also wanting to put up that banner headline, if you will, from a marketing perspective, which is Wilson to Sutton touchdown wins the game.
Yeah. Yep.
And you can't always go for gold. Sometimes you simply need to spread the ball around just to win the football game.
Be a game manager. Yeah, be a game manager for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I know we're running a little short on time. Should we start going into some questions, guys?
Yeah.
And then maybe we could wrap up with final thoughts of where we think what the Chargers need to do, what the Broncos need to do, and we kind of go from there. Okay, cool. So why don't we go through maybe some of the questions and then we can go from there.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, I got a couple ones. The first question came in from Aether. Let's put it up on here on the board here. Jumbotron, here it is. It says, knowing the Broncos offense is struggling, how important is it for the defense to not give up touchdowns in the red zone, please? What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. And now, is that I have to ask, is that how important it is for the Chargers defense not to give up those touchdowns? Because that's the way I'm reading it.
Yeah. That
Yeah,
sounds
that's what
about right to me.
that sounds about right to me. Yeah.
Yeah, so I would agree because you don't want to start. You don't want to. I actually think this could be a risk, right? Which is
Mhm.
momentum is a big thing in the NFL, especially when it comes to mental issues.
Right.
Huge.
And not to bring up some bad memories for you guys, but there is some
We have
there is some
plenty.
history
Yeah, we got a
of the
lot of them.
Chargers being the get right game for the Broncos.
Yeah.
Back to your previous comment that from your viewer there who brought up Peyton Manning, where we were not particularly doing well that season, and then Manning made a third/fourth quarter comeback and won the game with I think it was like 21 points or 22 points or something along those lines.
Yeah.
Against the Chargers, and I'm sure that's a game that all of you have intentionally tried to forget.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Whatever.
but nonetheless,
Yes,
you don't want to be the springboard for your divisional rival to start figuring things out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do think that is a legitimate risk because look, Russ might be hurt, but he's still a veteran savvy quarterback.
Yep.
He still has the ability, whether or not we would all like to admit it or not, he still has the ability to start turning it around.
Right.
And you do not want to be the team that allowed him to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, absolutely. Well, even to say, just to pick on the Chargers defense too. I mean, we've been giving up quite a bit of points too on our defense. I mean, I think we're actually 27.2 points that we've been giving up, and I think our average for our offense is actually lower than that. So, which is really weird to think that if we're at a 3-2 level as a team, we're giving up a fair amount of points more than we're scoring. So how is that even possible?
Well, we got our ass kicked by Jacksonville.
Exactly.
It was 39-10. That was
game.
the one game.
Yep.
Yeah. And Kyle and I were at that game. We wanted to jump off the top of SoFi after that game. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I was ready. I was ready to just. Yep. I was ready to call it quits. Yep.
Done deal.
But basically, I'm just saying that the Broncos could get right in this game, to be honest. I mean, there's a chance.
Possible.
And just as a Chargers fan, I mean, you could even just say about that Jaguars game. We all thought, hey, we're going to run these guys. And guess what? We got smoked. And hey, we're NFL. These are NFL
I told you guys you were going to lose.
Yeah. And the Texans. And the Texans.
I told every single Chargers fan you guys were going to lose.
Yep.
Because we definitely weren't playing well at that time either. We were not gelling offensively. Defensively, we were okay. And it's interesting, the Texans came back and won the Jaguars last week, which was just crazy to me. I just didn't expect that either. So, excellent point. What are the questions we have here, Kyle?
All right, let's see. Pull up another one here. So, okay, it's from John Rowley. He got one. Here goes. Let's see. I feel for the fans. Question. Does anyone else understand that Russell Wilson thinks he is now on the same level as Brady and Peyton Manning? He's overly confident and,
Yeah.
That's exactly what I was talking about. That was the comment that I was brought up when I was speaking before. Is you have an issue with regards to current level of play. We'll call it ego, and I think the challenge of the real challenge of a first-year head coach, which is learning the balance of all of those.
Yeah. Good
And
call. Yep.
And I think that's really what you're seeing now with Hackett is either Hackett isn't being empowered, or Hackett is truly trying to be a player's coach when he needs to simply say, like, I know this can be harsh for some to hear, but like, dude, do what you're told and just go play.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
True.
Well, and you're right. He's managing his ego, right? And so I have a buddy who's a Seahawks fan. I told you that, right? So he was actually totally cool with Russell Wilson leaving. He's like, oh, we don't need him. Blows me the way that Geno Smith is kicking ass in Seattle. He's actually doing fairly well. And Geno Smith was in the Chargers for a long time.
Why does that surprise you?
Well, because he wasn't good in San Diego at all. He was terrible, right? And he wasn't a good
Jets
quarterback.
too,
Yeah. But here's the thing. Pete Carroll is very good at game management. To your point, I think he controlled Russell Wilson better. I think they were a good tandem in that sense. And I think reading between the lines, in my opinion, because I was going to piggyback on your original conversation about this, is that I think he wanted to go somewhere, get his fat contract, and be the guy.
Yeah.
He showed up in Denver, got his fat contract, and he wants to be the guy, but he's really not the guy, right? And I think Pete Carroll saw that. He knew that, and he knew how to manage him moving forward. So that's my take. I think that's what you're getting at. Correct me if I'm wrong.
The other thing that Seattle has done is exactly what they never did when Wilson was there, in some part because they drafted so piss poorly. But the first thing they did this season when they lost Russ, solidify their tackles.
Yeah.
Yep.
Never had
Abrams is an animal.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He is legit at the right tackle spot. And frankly, if he keeps on this pace, if he's not in the Pro Bowl, it just needs to go away.
Yeah.
Great.
I mean, his stats are just mind blowing as a rookie. I mean, he should be in some conversations for like offensive player of the year. Just the problem is that it's such an unsexy position at the right tackle that no one will ever vote him there. But if you look at his stats, they are just jaw dropping.
Yeah,
for sure.
Insane. I was actually just going to make a comment.
100%.
I was going to make a comment about Russell Wilson and his ego too. I know that was just a second ago that we chatted about that, but on Good Morning Football, Kyle Brandt chatted a little bit about the ego that Russell Wilson has, and it was like an award show or something like that for the NFL or whatnot. Kyle Brandt was like, "Hey, Russ, can I like interview?" And him and Sierra are walking down, the red carpet or whatnot. Yep. They just look away. Sorry. Nope, we're good. They're acting like they're like Jay-Z and Beyonce, basically, and they could just do whatever they want when they want. And he went on this whole rant about it, and he's like, look, man, that's not a guy you want. That's not a guy that you need to have that is willing to not talk to people because they think they're just this high level gift to the people or gift to the NFL or whatnot. And so it's just a tough thing to hear something like that. And
do you think that's partially because of Sierra? Because she's I mean, think about that for a second. They become this sort of celebrity couple, right? Yep. Oh, we're amazing. We're this and that. And it's not necessarily that it's like, he plays football, but he views himself as some sort of
celeb.
I don't know.
In a way.
He sees
himself. Think about what has Sierra done recently,
No, I think what it is he sees himself as football and football plus football and I think that he sees that in part because his wife is such a known celebrity throughout the pop culture, and I think that comes with frankly, I think it's a difficult thing to control for any person. So I don't even, it's not that I don't blame him, but I think he needs more people in his life to put him in his place. I'm happy to be that person if he would like. But just give me a call. Trust me, dude. I'll say exactly what you don't want to hear. And but see, the thing is, I will say exactly what you don't want to hear, but it's what you need to hear.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
So
and I think that's the important thing.
I know Hackett and Russ Wilson talked quite a bit after their last game. Do you have any insight to what that conversation was? I heard it. They made a comment that they got in a room together for like an hour and hashed out whatever they hashed out. Do you have any insight to what that was after the game?
My insight to it is I heard that it had a lot to do with, and I think what we're going to see is what I don't want to see. And this is kind of what I was referring to earlier, is that sometimes the head coach simply needs to sit there and tell the quarterback, shut up and play properly.
Yep. Do your job.
And I think what's happening here is that Hackett has already come up and said that he is trying to blend and mesh. You're seeing a really interesting mesh point between what the Packers ran and what the Seahawks ran.
Correct.
Now, I can assure you the Seahawks offense that you're seeing is 100% Russ coming in, pounding the table to say, I want to run these plays because I like these plays. And Hackett is saying, that's fantastic, but these groups of plays that I have are really good and they work really, really well. If you would like to see my evidence, please go see Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right.
The dude has been on fire the last 3 or 4 years. Like he is just stupid good. Like,
Yep.
Two MVPs. That says enough. Back to back.
100%.
Exactly.
100%.
So Hackett is saying, like, I have this whole group of things that I know work, and then Russ is saying, yeah, but I want to do this. And what Hackett is trying to do is he's saying, okay, well, let's blend them. And that is someone trying to be a player's coach. And at some point, you simply need to say, just go and play, or you need to completely go the other way and almost throw someone under the bus, right? And say, all right, we're going to run all what you have to say. And then you get up on the podium and say, I have adopted what Russell Wilson wants to do at the quarterback position. We're going to run that the next game, and hopefully that all works out for us. And if it absolutely bombs and tanks, which I suspect it probably will.
Yeah.
Because to your point, I think Carroll was very good at kind of controlling things and kind of really keeping things in check. At that point, then, frankly, I think Russ has a lot of explaining to do. And in my opinion, I think what really needs to take place here is I think egos need to be put fully in check, perhaps even on Hackett's side. And I think the two of them need to truly look at the plays that were on the field, what we saw against the Colts, look at the all 22, just like I did, and look at the plays where you saw open wide receivers on crossers, where you saw the pinch wide receivers that were doing kind of the in route and then out route, that completely wide open, like great play calling. That's all on Hackett. So stop blaming a dude that's putting together really good plays on the field and actually start analyzing what's on tape and on film and actually take responsibility and ownership for mistakes you make.
You know, and the one thing I'm going to even say about that is that I feel like Russell Wilson hasn't done a very good job of going through progressions in his plays. And so he's looking very much just like, hey, there's two guys here. I know those plays. I'm going to just look at that direction, and those are my two guys. And that's it. Like, in contrast, you hear Justin Herbert and Shane Day, our quarterback coach, says, man, Justin Herbert goes through all of his progressions in such a short amount of time. And I mean, mind you, no coach is going to badmouth their quarterback by any means, but at the same side, that's what you hear and that's what you see as a result for Justin Herbert. And so I feel like Russell Wilson is kind of having a hard time, maybe even just grasping certain plays, or he's always been that guy of just, hey, I look at two dudes and that's all I do. And I decide at that point which one I'm throwing to.
I heard some interesting comments.
However, Ron Rivera literally just badmouth his quarterback. Yeah. He said,
totally
so what do you think of why we're at 1-4 right now? He just said quarterback.
That was hilarious. I was like, damn.
I was like, oh, dang.
Really did that?
Yeah, he really did that. You know, he later apologized or whatever.
Yeah. Run him over with a bus. See ya, bud.
Yep.
Well,
yeah, no,
Carson Wentz ain't
my
that good.
thing is
I'll just say that.
So here's the ultimate question. Andrew, you made a really interesting point, and I actually heard what you said, except phrased differently. And I think this is a super interesting thing that I had never thought of from this perspective, even as a Broncos guy and digging about as deep as you can get into some of this stuff, which is, has Russ ever been asked in his career to do some of the things that he's being asked to do now in this Hackett-based offense?
Good point. Yeah.
And what I mean by that is, did Pete Carroll control so much of the offensive play call? Filtered through in and out. Did it have such just such a lane that it had to fit within? Has Russ actually been asked to do some of the stuff he's being asked to do now? And I'm not sure the answer to that is yes.
Yeah. Pete Carroll, my buddy, again, a Seahawks fan, he didn't like Pete Carroll because he felt like Pete Carroll sort of made Russ do kind of what he needed them to do, right? He said, no, you're doing this. He was kind of told what to do. He executed what he knew. But I think you're right. I think he probably came in, Nathaniel Hackett probably sat him down. There was this long conversation. Hey, I want to be the guy. I want these plays. You take these plays, and we go from there. And I think I do ask myself this question. Has he lost the locker room, right? And the respect of some of his players, because again, these guys got egos. This is a great example. Russ obviously has an ego.
Who's the he?
Who Nathaniel Hackett. Has he lost?
Yeah. No.
Yeah. You don't think so?
No. Because I think these so have you ever seen some of the players do film breakdown on like NFL Network and stuff?
A little bit, not on the Broncos specifically, but yeah.
No, my point being is that when you see the players are really sharp. They live, eat, and breathe football. And so they're going to look at the film and they're going to see a wide open KJ Hamler and see Russ try to throw into a covered Cortland Sutton.
Yep.
And they're going to look at that and say, that isn't Hackett.
Yeah.
Russ, what were you thinking? And I think that's ultimately what I hate to kind of flog the dead horse here, but I think that's kind of what you're hearing when you Richard Sherman just doesn't really articulate as much as people like to think that he does. He doesn't
run the dang ball.
Yeah, he speaks in these really broad-based hyperbole style sentences and stuff, which is good for you. That's why you're in broadcasting now. But I think if you were to truly sit down and properly articulate what he's trying to say, ultimately, I think what he's trying to say is Russ made mistakes and was never held accountable for the mistakes that he made by the head coach. And then as a result, the other players that knew what they were doing looked at that and said, Russ, that's on you. Fix your crap.
Yep.
Because I get called out by my coaches and I'm expected to fix mine. And rightfully so. We expect the same of you.
Well, and we want to elevate everybody's play, right? Coaching and also players, right? It's not a one-way street. It's a two-way street, right? And so that's the only reason I would say is, if Russ isn't bought in and the amount of money that they've guaranteed to pay him, you got to wonder how long ownership's going to stay with Nathaniel Hackett if that's the case, right? So you might say, well, we want to go get somebody else. It's going to be, a patsy, if you will. And he could run the only offenses. It's an interesting conversation depending on how the season, progresses, right? And again, to be very clear, we all know every team in the NFL right now is still figuring themselves out, right? With the limited amount of snaps they get in the preseason across the board, they're really not playing. Plus, they didn't even play in preseason games. Yeah. Most of these players don't. So, they're still figuring things out. They're still figuring out what plays work. They're still figuring out what works in the red zone. And I think that's really where the Broncos are at, to your point. So they're figuring things out.
The red zone is where it gets real, though. That's where you have to sharpen your pencil. You got to really figure stuff out. You have to actually be true to the scheme. You have to be accurate, and you have to follow through your progressions quickly. And ultimately, in Seattle's offense, they've typically only had 2 to 3 really top-tier echelon weapons. And so it's been pretty quick in order for someone like Russ, when he was there, to go through his progressions. In Denver, as much as people might like to disagree, we have a much broader group of offensive weapons, frankly, most of which are very good. And so you then actually need to properly scan the field, not so dissimilar from what you guys were saying that Herbert is doing a very good job of doing now. And then you have to spread the ball around. So you're actually dealing with different skill sets. And if you haven't polished or sharpened the one by scanning the field, then it could actually impact you long term.
Yeah.
Great.
One thing that I have been very impressed with Justin Herbert is his pocket awareness. If you go back and watch the Browns game, you had Myles Garrett a couple times, just about to crunch him, and he just stepped up in the pocket, threw the ball downfield. But he moved in such a way where there was no way that even if he swiped at the ball, he was going to hit the ball out of his hands as he was throwing the ball to his wide receiver. And he was still accurately throwing the ball to the wide receiver. I was like, damn, that is amazing. And so that just kind of blew me away. So, yeah, I think that's great. So, yeah, I know. Do we have any more questions here, Kyle?
Yeah, we had another question here. That was a pretty good question though from John.
For sure.
Yeah. So you got another one here from Aether. Because I think he actually uses a voice to text thing. So I'm gonna have to kind of translate this one a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah. So I have a second question for our guest. If the Bolts give up a big lead, are the Broncos going to give up the run game? Yes or no? Thanks.
No.
Oh, they're going to keep running, huh?
No,
even with Fumble Gordon.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah, but you have to remember there's 2 other players that you're going to see. You're going to see Latavius Murray, who the Broncos are going to want to use.
Okay.
Who is likely going to be holding onto the ball better. The other one who I think that Chargers fans, you won't know this guy, but it's what's his name? Divine.
Broncos fans have
Divine. I can't remember the guy's last name. He was a preseason just absolute stud. Came in like of the 11th hour of preseason and just blew up the last preseason game for us. He was spectacular.
Cool.
Really?
And just give me one second. I can't believe I'm gapping on the guy's name.
Mike Boone, I know, has been your guy.
Divine is
Zigbo. Zigbo.
Zigbo. So he came from the Saints practice squad. We signed him at the early onset he was a cut from the Saints. We actually brought him in from waivers. He was a stud as a running back for us in preseason. We saw little flashes from him in the last game with the Colts, but I think he needs to kind of get a little bit more involved and perhaps be used a little bit more. So I could see us really trying to bludgeon the Chargers in the run game with the bigger running backs to wear the defense down to really start to stretch the game out. So you're thinking of it from a fact of saying, if the Bolts jump into if you guys jump into a huge lead, I actually think what the Broncos will try to do is they're going to try to run the ball to keep you guys off the field
100%.
and then leverage the run game to get us kind of back into the game a little bit more. Now, are we going to try to throw the ball a lot because we're behind? Sure. But I think the run game will not be completely eliminated. And I think we're going to try to really hit you guys really hard to kind of stretch out the game.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a big part of the play action too, right?
Huge play,
you guys run quite a bit of play action. I mean, you got to run so you can set up the play action and go from there. It's interesting because I really feel like that's how the game was going to go against the Browns last week, Chargers and Browns. And it was awesome to see the Chargers finally break out and actually beat, because we were dead last in rushing. We actually beat the Browns, the number one team in rushing, in rush yards last week, which is amazing. And actually, Justin Herbert didn't have a great game. I think he only passed for 250 yards, something like that.
Yeah.
And a touchdown. But it was good to finally see the offensive line gel and the running backs go. But I will say this. The key to that was Sony Michel was not on the field. So it was Austin Eckler and then Joshua Kelly. So I think you're only going to see those two for the most part. You might see a little Sony Michel. But I think after having
Browns have also struggled in run defense.
Yeah, big time. Yeah.
The Browns have struggled in run defense. So you guys simply just basically played to a strength that you had to a weakness of theirs.
Yep. Well, and their long rips were actually at the interior defensive linemen for the Browns, which are actually ranked second and last in the league. So they attacked their weakness, which is what you should be doing as a coach. I mean, bottom line,
I think it was the best game that Lombardi called all season for sure.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. Best game. Keep it up.
Keep it up.
Keep it up, man. So, Richie, I know we kind of chatted a little bit about this game. Let's talk about your 3 keys to win this game for the Broncos. We'd just love to be able to hear what your guys' thoughts are. I know you've chatted a little bit about it, but let's talk about your 3 keys to this game for you.
So I think number 1 is going to be reshuffling our offensive line.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that's like a really weird thing to say, hey, I want a massive change, and then that's going to help us. But I actually think that's going to happen. So I said this on the Wild West podcast just before I came live here. My ideal offensive line will be Calvin Anderson on the left at the left tackle position. Garrett Bowles is going to be gone for the season with the broken leg. Calvin Anderson, in some respects, is actually an upgrade. Yes, that's right. I said an upgrade.
Really?
He typically gets called less for penalties. He is also a very good run blocking left tackle, and he has improved in his pass protection. So I actually think that, generally speaking, and the other thing is, even though he's not great in pass pro, what he does better than Bowles is he adjusts his body and moves much quicker to stay between him and the quarterback, as opposed to holding the guy to trying to prevent him from getting to the quarterback. So I think Anderson is going to be someone that you guys are going to be probably pretty surprised just because you're not familiar with him, likely as Chargers fans. And then I want to see our left guard stay as is. I don't really see a need to move on from him. I want to see Glasgow move to center. Glasgow is a natural offensive center. His best years with the Lions were at offensive center. He has never looked good as a guard, yet the Broncos seem to try to force that square peg in the round hole, or the rectangular peg in the round hole. It makes no sense whatsoever. You just can't square that circle. And so I think it's important that he moves to the offensive center position. And then depending on Miners and his health, Miners would be a massive upgrade and frankly the rightful right guard for the Denver Broncos. He's been hurt the last few weeks. It's likely you will see him there, but if he's not there, I'd like to see Netane Moody go in at right guard. He is a much better run blocking right guard. And then, of course, Cam Fleming at right tackle. I think it just makes the most sense. Billy Turner, I think, is still going to be hurt and he's not 100%. So I'd rather just see the guy that's kind of proven there for us staying at right tackle. So that's kind of my number one. Number two, because of our tackles having some struggles and because in my opinion, it gives you a little bit more versatility, I would like to see the Broncos leverage 22 personnel. And for those that don't know what that means, that's 2 tight ends on the field.
2 running backs, 2 tight ends.
Yep.
Correct. I want to see that or kind of 12 personnel, which is your 2 tight ends and your kind of standard mix of wide receivers and running backs, either of those 2. But rather than seeing what Nathaniel Hackett has typically done with the Green Bay offense, which is 2 tight ends and they're stacked on the right-hand side or the left-hand side, I want to see what we did last year, and that we saw that in the game against the Colts. You flank them, so you have one on the left and one on the right. So that means a tight end to the left of the left tackle and a tight end to the right of the right tackle. And I think that really opens up a lot in the West Coast running offense, and I think that I'd like to see a little bit more of that. That also allows us to throw passes to our tight ends up the seams because you can kind of just slip past protection and kind of get open as a tight end as well. And that can be very, very dangerous from the offensive perspective.
Sure.
And last but not least, we gotta fix the red zone stuff. And one way of doing that is to stop pretending you're a team you're not. And what I mean by that is sometimes you just got to go into massive big packages. You just got to basically throw an extra lineman in and force the ball through the running game and stop trying to pass it. And I think that we need to kind of start calling a duck, and we need to start getting back to what makes Broncos football, and that's running the ball into the end zone.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Definitely.
And it'd be interesting to kind of, and I like hearing these type of things because then it's something for us to look at too and see if RichiRichEh is actually the coach of the Broncos and he's making the calls. So I love hearing these little things that I can look at during the game. We'll be at the stadium, Andrew and I, so we'll be looking at it and checking it all out. So we're excited about the game. I think it's going to be a fun game all around. I just really hope it's not that Colts Broncos Thursday night game. Oh my goodness.
Well, I will say this: the one thing that you'll see with the Chargers, they're gonna get their yards or points, right? Now the real question will boil down to how good is the Broncos defense going to be against our offense?
Agreed.
I will also say this: I think keys for the Chargers would be takeaways. Right now, we're +2 in the takeaway department right now, which is good, and could even be higher than that, especially with the first game of the season. We could have almost had like 4 picks that damn game.
Big time.
I could think of probably 6 picks that we could have had. Having said that, I think it's really going to boil down to how solid is that Broncos defense to our offense. Because if they can slow us down, that'll be the keys. Because again, just to your point though, the Broncos want an ugly game. They want to keep Herbert off the field, get ugly, get 3 and outs. If they can stop us, that'll be perfect. But look, I think it's going to be a hard-fought game, guys. What do you guys think in the comments down below? Do you think it's going to be a tough game? What are your score predictions as well? Because I think it's going to be a lot closer than a lot of people would think. I think what does Vegas have it at right now?
I think 5 right now.
Is it 5? Okay.
Yeah.
Because I was looking at that the other day. I was curious where it actually sits at now. So, I mean, I think 5 sounds about right to me. I think it's going to be a hard-fought game, right? And again, it's a rivalry game. These teams don't like each other. It's like Raiders, Chargers, Chargers, Broncos, right? Hey, there's bad blood there, and and there's a lot of talent on both sides of the ball. So I think it'll be really interesting. I would say this: if we get 2 takeaways, game's in the bag. I think it could happen, and I know, Gordon fumbles a lot. I don't think Russ has been accurate. So I think We could see J.C. Jackson come alive this game. He'll probably lock down Sutton, or at least beyond Sutton, or it'll be Asante Samuel. So I'm really curious to see that kind of matchup as well too. So I'm curious. I'm really curious to see how it's going to be this week. What are your thoughts, Sir James?
Yeah, and that's one thing I was going to say too. And I know, once again, I don't want to talk too much too heavily about the Chargers, which we'll chat about that later on for our pregame.
Sure.
But I kept saying that I think J.C. Jackson, this is the game that's his get right game. And we've had him as a big guy that we signed in the offseason and hasn't really paid off yet. I mean, I know he's had his ankle injuries situation, but this is the get right game for him. So I kind of expected him to be able to get an interception this game, or make some serious plays. I mean, I know he had a first pass defense this last game, or he batted a ball down, which was great to see. Things are starting to kind of gel for him. So, my thing with this game is we just got to play our football and play our smart football. We'll see if Brandon Staley wants to make some sort of weird decision again. Will he go for a lot of fourth downs if necessary? Who knows? I mean, that when he made that last call, was stunned. I was like, am I really seeing what's happening right now? Like, is this really going on right now, that they're going to do it right at this point in time in the game? But anyways, smart, sound football. I hope the run game could stay to where they've been at. Broncos defense is very solid. So I do think it's going to be a little bit low scoring of a game for the team. So very general of my thoughts on this game at the moment. But, I think that's something that I'm expecting kind of an interesting game. I'm definitely expecting not a 12-9 game. I'm not expecting that, but I'm expecting that the Chargers get a couple touchdowns somewhere or another. We'll see if the Broncos can get some touchdowns to kind of make it a little bit more tighter of a game. So,
yeah. Russ has only got 4 touchdowns on the season at this point.
Yeah.
And I'll say this too. It looks like Allen's trending positive. He probably will be in the game, and we got Parham back. He's another good red zone target for the Chargers as well, along with Mike Wilson or Mike Williams.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Kyle. What are your thoughts? And then we can wrap up.
Yeah, man. I mean, I don't know. Like I worry that the Chargers are going to charger, and this is going to be a much closer game than we thought.
Yeah.
It's not going to be a field goal fest. It could be, but it could be actually a pretty close game. I'm worried about. So like I'm thinking like 20-27. So I know Aether just said he doesn't think that they're going to get 20 points, but I mean this could be like Richie was saying, is that it could be a confidence game for Russ. And because even Lockdown said, Coach, like the Broncos, they play tough against us every year.
Yes,
and
they do.
So do the Chiefs, so do the Raiders. And because we're all divisional opponents, we really want to make this win. So like we always say though too, is like any given Sunday we can lose to any team, just like we did with the Jaguars and the Texans last year. So I am not sleeping on the Broncos just because they're down right now. So
Always.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It just goes to show you any given Sunday, right? Every team in the NFL is good. Every team is good. And if you could game plan and scheme them well enough to take away what they do well, then you have a shot of winning. That's the whole point, right? And every game is going to be interesting. So, no, I think this is excellent. Well, I'll say this, Rich. Thank you so much for hopping on. I know it's late where you're at, and I know you're probably ready to go to sleep. But seriously, thank you so much for hopping on with us and having conversations. We're going to be texting during the game for sure. So we'll look at the chat. I'll be at the stadium. We'll be sending you pictures. We'll have a good time, man. We'll have a good time with it for sure.
No, I think it's great. The one thing I do think your fans need to look at in the game is the caliber and quality of the Broncos safeties.
Yep.
Yeah. They're pretty clutch.
I really think that they are not talked about enough, and I think that there's likely going to be a takeaway, and I'm not sure it'll come from a cornerback. I think it'll come from one of our safeties.
Yep,
makes sense.
And I think that's where you guys are going to be a little shocked to say, how did that guy, take over Allen, or how did that guy, intercept Williams, or whatever the case may be. So I think it's actually really, really interesting. And yes, I'm an Eastern Standard guy, so like it's like 10:30 right now where I am.
Yeah.
So and I go to bed at like 2:30 in the morning. So no, I'm not particularly tired.
Oh wow, 2:30 in the morning. Holy smokes.
Yeah.
Are you a
nice.
vampire? What's the situation with that? You sleep like this?
Yeah.
Only on Tuesdays. But
Only on Tuesday.
Oh, today's the night. Today's the night.
Nice.
yeah.
That's
I
great.
love it.
But no, it's I actually think it's really interesting, and I think that's something that you guys are going to want to look at because we have an absolute we are loaded at the safety position.
Yeah.
And that
We're
makes sense
loaded.
going back to your comment earlier that if they're going to do some trade bait of some sort to try to get a little bit more draft capital, if you got a kind of a cog of good safety play out there, that's perfect reason to throw somebody to another team. I mean, it kind of goes back to the Micah Fitzpatrick trade too. I mean, he's a fantastic player for the Steelers and they got him from the Dolphins, and it was a draft capital kind of situation that added to that team, which I think that
100%.
year they had like a crazy amount of picks. I think it was like 13 picks or something stupid like that. So I can definitely see that.
Thanks, Coach. Hey, Coach, we'll add you to the thread as well. So we'll do a little trash talking during the game, right? So we'll have fun with it, Coach. We'll make
Just
sure
for the
you're
record, so
involved.
all of your viewers understand that they have basically said that they are going to have 4 Chargers fans and
Yes.
1 Broncos fan.
Keep up
And,
on
I
it.
mean, we can imagine where this conversation is going to likely end up, right?
That's exactly right. Exactly right.
Maybe we should bring some of your friends from the Mile High Roundtable podcast into the chat too, so that way, like you can have some more ammunition going back and forth.
That's
Oh,
right.
trust me, I'm just fine on my own.
Nice.
Oh, I love it. I
great.
love it. Well,
All right, guys. Well, hey,
again-
so we're gonna have our pregame show likely the day before Sunday night, I believe. So,
Yep.
Because it's a Monday night game, so because I'm gonna be stuck at work for most of the game. So, but I'll probably try to be out in the wild, maybe trying to find a bar or something like that, trying to hang out with some folks. So, yeah, maybe you might see me if you're one of those unfortunates that are stuck at work and stuff out here. But then I'm not 100% sure how we're gonna do the post game show. We haven't quite talked about that one yet, but we're gonna try and get that going too. So it might be the night after, or it might be really late, a late show. So
Well, David Letterman.
we'll figure that out for sure. And Kyle, when are you going to do your simulation?
oh yeah, I'm gonna run my my Madden simulation for the Broncos versus Chargers game tomorrow night. Probably about like the same time as usual, about 8 p.m. or so. Just gonna see how it goes and just answer some more questions, just chat and just chum it up, just feel free to talk. And I might even have like my calling VoIP set up so people can call in and we can, have a quick little chat,
Yep.
I
Sounds
like
good.
that. Yeah, maybe I'll call in, tell some cheesy ass jokes.
Yeah, I
sounds
like
like a
that.
good idea.
You get some Laffy Taffy jokes and start and just call them in.
There you go.
Like, what the hell's wrong with Andrew? Did he take an edible or what's going on here?
Oh, that guy.
He's stroking out.
Yeah.
Like, what's up with this guy? Well,
Yeah.
Rich, seriously, thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate it. Honestly,
Appreciate it.
it was great. Great conversation. I really hope everyone enjoyed this. And guys, definitely check out the Wild Wild West podcast and everything Rich has got going. Make sure we got to put a link down below. They put out some great content. So, I know it's been great having you. Love chatting with you. I love your insight as well, too. Seriously, thank you so much.
Appreciate
Thanks,
it, man. Thank you, everyone. And, love to see anyone here over on the Wild Wild West podcast.
Absolutely.
And obviously, anytime you guys have questions about the Broncos, I am always happy to jump on and kind of give you my takes, which are typically more other team friendly because I'm not always saying the Broncos are going to win everything by 35 points. So,
Agreed. And that's a good
Anyways,
perspective. I mean, a lot of fans will say we always going to win 100%. And it's unlike being like a Dallas Cowboys fan where they're like, yep, Super Bowl every year, 20-0, baby. Like, we're going all the way. We're not going to lose one single game. So I get it. And as Charger fans, I feel like we are trying to not say that we win every single game. I mean, we understand our team and we've been through a lot of heartbreaks more often than not.
Yeah.
100%. Well, again, thank you so much, Rich. Really appreciate it. And as always, bolt up.
Yeah. Let's go.
Let's go.